This is a Sports Catastrophe production. Hey there, Heather, ho there, it's Jeff Cutter and welcome you to another Sports Catastrophe on this day. And on this day, September the 23rd, way back in 1908, yes, more than a century, a famous error ruined the 1908 National League season. You can probably see it by the newspaper article, but I need to give you some context about Merkles' boner. So the 1908 NL pennant race was huge. You had Pittsburgh, who won the National League belt in 1901, 1902, and 1903. The first two, of course, before the World Series was invented in 1903. The Giants who were the 1904 and 1905 champions of the NL, and the Cubs 1906, 1907. So the strange thing is that the three teams, the Pirates, the Giants, and Cubs, won the pennant races, the first 7 pennant races. It would be a long time before somebody would break the big three. Can't remember when. I'm thinking 1911, but no, maybe not. Anyway, Pittsburgh Giants and Cubs were all in it. It was them and the rest of the National League that contained the Dodgers, the the Dodgers, the Braves, the Cardinals, the Reds, and there's another two hockey pucks. How can I not remember the other team? The Braves. Well, whatever. So, as this. Play started September 23rd, 1908. The Cubs and Giants were tied for first place. But the funny thing is that the Giants had 6 games and had played 137 games, whereas the Cubs only played 143. So the Giants technically still had time to catch the Cubs. The Pirates were 1.5 games behind. Fred Merkles was a fresh-faced greenhorn, a rookie first baseman. He was 19 years old and only played in 38 games. And would be the backup to regular Giants first baseman Fred Tenney. Merkles actually had to have a couple of foot surgeries. He wasn't really supposed to play. Merkles had never started a game in his career. But unfortunately, he would be first in lineup when Fred Tenney actually had a case of the bungo. The bungo, meaning that McGraw had to put Merkles in the starting lineup. So at the Polo Grounds in New York, it was going to happen. Christy Mathewson and Jack Feister would start the games. And the game only had 2 umpires, Bob Esmele and Hank Day. The Cubs struck first in the 4th inning as Joe Tinker hit a inside the park home run. The Polo Grounds at the time was so cavernous and all that you could easily get an inside the park home run. So Mathewson gave up his first homer since July 17th, ironically, against Tinker. The Giants would tie the game when Bud Herzog singled, got to second on an error, was sacrificed by Roger Brezner, the catcher, and then scored on Mike Donlin's single. So it was 1-1, bottom of the 9th. Feister remained on the mound for the Cubs, as it was usual at the time. They didn't really have relief pitchers. Cy Seymour grounded out. Art Devlin singled, making sure that he was on first base. Moose McCormick would then ground to second, and Devlin was forced out. However, Devlin's slide prevented the double play, making sure McCormick was on first base. And then, with McCormick on first and 2 outs, Merkles came up to bat and singled down the right field line. McCormick got to third base. So Al Bridwell, the shortstop, came up to the plate with 2 outs and runners on the corners. He swung at the first pitch from Feister and hit a single to center field. McCormick ran home from third, and the Giants would win the game 2-1 and take the lead in the division. In the conference, whatever. The Giants fans poured out of the stands and mopped the field. Because in the era of these ballparks, the fans sitting behind home plate had to go exit the ballpark via the outfield. Merkles, who was trying to go from first to second, saw the fans swarm in the playing field. And sometimes at that time, they would just have a base hit and the game would be over without them worrying about it. However, the rule says a run is not scored if the runner advances to home base during a play in which the third out is made by any runner being forced out. So he was there. Johnny Evers, the famous Cubs second baseman, knew that and had to have the rule enforced. He shouted to his center fielder, Sully Hoffman, to retrieve the ball and throw it to Evers. There was an account that Joe McGinnity, the Star Giants pitcher, actually caught the ball and threw it into the fans, making sure that Evers didn't have the right ball. And then Evers would retrieve the ball and touch second base, although some say he had a different ball. The umpires consulted and said that Merkles had not touched second base. He was out, and the run did not score. O'Day was attacked by many fans. It was unknown about this thing. So that was not really the best thing in the world. People didn't know how the ball got to Evers, in a way. And some say that the New York Times said Frank Chance, who was the Cubs player manager, actually was the one who realized the situation and needed the ball thrown to second base. And all that. Anyway, I didn't know what had happened. Merkles said he didn't touch second base, but he was told by the umpire that the game was over. All that. It was just terrible and all that. Okay, the team I missed were the Phillies. Sorry about that. Anyhow, the fans could not be cleared, and the game was called on darkness, so it was a 1-1 tie and upheld. The Giants would appeal it and all that. Anyway, the Cubs, Giants, Pirates pennant race actually happened in the final days. The Giants did win 11 of their last 16 games to be 98-55. Whereas the Cubs won 8 out of 10 to have 98 wins. The Pirates tried and all that. Unfortunately for the Pirates, they had actually ended up losing to the Cubs on the final day. With the Giants-Cubs game from September 23rd being a tie, they had played 143 official games, whereas Pittsburgh played 154, beg pardon. And the Pirates had 154 games. So, in essence, it meant that for some strange reason, that tie game had to be replayed because it affected the standings. The Cubs and Giants were tied and had to have a makeup game to decide the pennant. Whoever loses would have to tie Pittsburgh for second in the NL. But whoever won would be the NL champion and would face the Detroit Tigers for the division. For the World Series. Anyway, Matheson was a little tired and couldn't start that game. Feister started for the Cubs again in the rematch. But after hitting Tenney, walking Hershock giving up an RBI double to Donlin and Watkins Seymour. He couldn't come in the game, so Three Finger Brown had to come in and got out of the jam. The Cubs were up. The Cubs were down 1-0. But in the third inning, they put out a clinic. Tinker had a triple. Johnny Kling, the catcher, had a single. After Evers walked, Wildfire Schultz hit an RBI double to make it 2-1, and then Frank Chance had a 2-run double. The Cubs cruised to a 4-2 victory and meant that they were going to the World Series instead of the Giants. The Cubs were going to win the World Series, though. Of course, there was a gigantic aftermath because since the Giants lost the one-game playoff, in a sense, Fred Merkle would be basically ostracized by the Giants for fans for life, if you will. The Cubs went on to win the World Series, too. And that was the last time that the Cubs would win a World Championship till 2016. Pirates would come back to win the 1909 World Series. And the Giants returned to the World Series for 3 straight years, 11, 12, and 13, losing each year. The Giants would not win a title until 1921, beating the Yankees. Fred Merkle would have a gigantic hatred of him and all that. He was the nickname of Bonehead. Merkle became the full-time first baseman in 1910 and would play for the Giants, Dodgers, and Cubs for 10 more years. He would play in 5 World Series, all for the losing team. Despite the fact that Merkle made a gigantic boo-boo, Giants manager John McGraw insisted on keeping Merkle on the squad because he was a good baseball player and he should not be judged by the offense. Big mistake. Giants fans would not allow it to happen. Merkle would avoid baseball for years after he retired in 1926. He did come to a Giants old-timers game in 1950 and got a lot of ovation from the fans. He would die 6 years later. A lot of people actually said that Merkle's boner actually was a curse for the Cubs because the Cubs won the World Series based off of that play, and that the Cubs, didn't deserve to make it. But it doesn't matter in the end, because in the end, it wasn't meant to be. So the Cubs would be cursed. This, alongside the curse of the Billy Goat, would haunt the Cubs fans for more than a century. Let's hope it's not more than a century before the Leafs win a Stanley Cup. That would be critical and cruel. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. Adieu.